Space Marine 2 has just joined the considerable echelon of brilliant Warhammer titles on PC, and that means it's the perfect time for a listicle about the very finest of them. Lore books and steady hands at the ready, because we're about to edge highlight some of the best PC games set in the Warhammer and Warhammer 40k universes. Hello and welcome to ROG Global, where we celebrate PC gaming, fight back the tide of vermin, and grin at the grimdark. With Space Marine 2 out now and showing us how beautiful a futuristic shoulder pad can look through the prism of AAA graphics, we deem it high time to talk about their very best PC titles that sit alongside it in the pantheon. So, let's do that now. Let's start with the reason we're even thinking about great Warhammer games right now. The release of Space Marine 2 has reminded us at ROG how surprisingly not grim or dark it feels to occupy the grimdark Warhammer 40k universe. The production values here really make you want to drop to your knees in reverence. Never has Warhammer 40k been realised with such scale, such cinematic bombast. It might only be a shooter, but it's a shooter that has a way of bringing you closer to this beloved setting than a game has managed before. It's a multi-talented shooter too, equally adept as a narrative-led solo campaign or Left 4 Dead style co-op experience, scrabbling around in the constant bombardment to res your mates. Also, side note, this might be the highest fidelity Space Marine armor in gaming to date.
In his name I will fight!
Vermintide 2. The absolute perfection of that formula Valve scribbled onto a bloodied restaurant serviette for Left 4 Dead. A co-op quartet making its way through hordes of enemies and taking down specials before making it to the safe zone and pretending not to care who got the most kills at the end of the round screen. The difference here, quite clearly, is the end time setting, where rats replace the traditional hordes of zombies. It's often oddly scenic for a world so ravaged by vermin and chaos and destruction, and developer Fat Shark's wizardry with Unreal Engine means it's aging better than Rob Lowe. There's a super deep persistent progress layer to it all too, so you can and will get obsessed with ruby rarity items and smelting your own custom gear down at Tal's Horn Keep. Also, the voice acting is absolutely epic. Victor Saltspire's line delivery will live in our heads rent-free forever. I make this video from need, not desire. Real-time strategy doesn't get the same airtime it once did. And when you play absolute masterpieces like Relics Dawn of War 3, you realise just how much of a shame that is. Numbers 1 and 2 remain obvious masterpieces of both the genre and the license, and while the hero unit micromanagement in this one wasn't for everyone at launch, you've still got 3 brilliantly balanced classes, the Space Marines, Eldar and Orcs, offering wildly different playstyles and aesthetics, going at it in grimdark melee maps and surprisingly cinematic campaigns that give you a lot of world building and exposition. The Space Marines play like your classic GDI human faction, but the Eldar's teleportation tech and the Orcs' love for scrap metal and war means that you need to approach base building and combat completely differently as each of the 3 endlessly warring clans. Dawn of War 3 leverages those differences brilliantly for campaign missions that always feel high stakes, cerebral, and visually spectacular. Some combinations seem so obvious in retrospect that you wonder how it took us so long as a civilization to think of them. Croissants and cookie dough, long journeys and headphones, and of course, Doom-style sprites and the Warhammer 40k universe. I could write poetry about how well Boltgun turns this setting into a retro FPS, but the lines would always pale into comparison next to the visual poetry of the game itself. So look, you just tell them, Boltgun. Over to you. See, quite moving, isn't it, really? Shout out to the sophisticated AI behaviour, the wonderful level design, and the brutal melee takedowns that have you dancing between enemies in a grim kind of rhythm that makes you feel as empowered as any shooter out there does.
The Emperor guides my hand!
Creative Assembly had been refining and perfecting the process of melding the Warhammer universe with its Total War Grand Strategy template since way back in 2016 when the first one came out, and while I still haven't let go of the fact that for some reason they didn't call it Total War: Hammer, or Warhammer Total Warhammer, except for those minor points, by number 3 it had reached unfathomable levels of excellence. Total War had been a forensically historical endeavour before now, so it was no small job to imbue the campaign map with winds of magic and to devise a battle system that simulated legions of winged vampire counts units going up against dwarven machinery or beastmen. But that it did, with spectacular visuals and an on-screen unit count that tests out even their very best PC gaming hardware. You'll lose 50 hours to your first campaign easily, and then you'll immediately start another and spend 100 more.
This is not the time for short-sightedness.
Short?
Oh, God, I just woke up from the strangest dream. It was the Warhammer universe, except it wasn't the Warhammer universe, and all the orcs and the Skaven and the dwarves were playing American football. Also, I'd forgotten to put on any trousers, and my old maths teacher was there, asking why I haven't done any homework for 7 years. You do wonder whether that's how Blood Bowl came into being, don't you? Anyway, however it happened, it turns out that a video game adaptation of tabletop American football, played by Warhammer races, is pretty engrossing stuff. And while the more recent Blood Bowl 3 is coming along, 2015's Blood Bowl 2 is for now where you can have the most immediate and long-lasting enjoyment. Little touches abound, like the fantastical take on US sports broadcasting in the game's pre- and post-match presentation, but it's the meat of the action that really sells it. An already violent contact sport made way more violent and at the same time more strategic and complex. Plus, no dragged out Taylor Swift halftime show. Bonus.
It looks like that stew on the menu tonight.
There we are then. Those are our picks from the massive Warhammer canon, but there are of course 7.3 million Warhammer games in total, so please let us know your personal picks in the comments. Deep cuts and hot takes welcome. Like this video if you want it to pop up on other people's feeds, subscribe to us for more like this, and we'll catch you in another one.